So I know journalists think everything is a big story, but let me say, what the Prime Minister said the other day in the House of Commons is a big story.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen.
That's an explosive allegation, effectively accusing the Indian government, a country, of playing some kind of a role in a hit, a targeted killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil.
For the Prime Ministers to stand up formally in the House of Commons and to make this statement, I would say that the government would have to be very convinced that we're dealing with credible intelligence.
Now, India strongly denies this. Allegations of Government of India's involvement in any act of violence in Canada are absurd and motivated. But trying to get to the truth, Trudeau's full statement in English, it was exactly 2 minutes and 46 seconds. And that's basically the intel we have to work with. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to deconstruct it. We're going to take you through that statement literally line by line, because every single sentence references a larger picture that, unless you've been following this story for like the last half century, it's really easy to miss important details. So let's watch together and I'll help it all make sense.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
So, who is Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and why was he killed?
This was a shocking and very public act of violence against a well-known community member.
He was a prominent Sikh leader, president of the Guru Nanak Gurdwara in Surrey, BC, just outside of Vancouver. But he was also viewed by India as a terrorist. They accused him of bombing a cinema, killing 6 people. He denied it, called the allegations garbage. In 2016, he told the Vancouver Sun, "I'm just a plumber." But he would also become a prominent activist, a separatist, calling for the carving out of a sovereign Sikh state within India's current borders.
A lot of people believe that Mr. Nijjar was specifically targeted and he was deliberately targeted inside the Gurdwara. I also believe so.
I am absolutely appalled that this would take place in a house of worship.
In the end, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot dead in the Gurdwara parking lot. It was June 18th, just before 8:30 p.m. on a Sunday. Police got the call.
When they arrived, they found Nijjar inside a pickup truck with gunshot wounds where he died of his injuries.
Canada is a rule of law country. The protection of our citizens and defense of our sovereignty are fundamental.
Now, on some level, it's strange to think of assassination as a sovereignty issue, but it really is about states exercising control in other states' affairs, and in the harshest way possible.
I think it's very clear that states think that they can operate with absolute impunity in Canada. A state's first move in foreign interference is not a targeted assassination. There's almost certainly been plenty of other foreign interference activities being conducted in Canada by India.
And that range of foreign interference activities could be anything. But if the Indian government did what the Prime Minister is accusing it of doing, that would represent just about the highest form of interference possible, short of, like, I don't know, a land invasion. Let's listen on.
Our top priorities have therefore been, 1, that our law enforcement and security agencies ensure the continued safety of all Canadians.
Safety is a really big issue here. And the Prime Minister's comments, keep in mind, are as much directed at Canadians as they are at India. When Hardeep Singh Nijjar was killed, the World Sikh Organization issued a statement. Thousands of Sikhs have fled India due to human rights abuses and oppression. India has a long track record of extrajudicially murdering individuals it accuses of being anti-national.
The shooting, which police believe was targeted, sending shockwaves through the Sikh community.
We have no reason to believe that the Sikh community is at risk.
But members of the Sikh community disagree and say Nijjar was publicly concerned for his safety and was receiving threats.
And indeed, in the last several months, there have been at least 2 other high-profile murders of Sikhs. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, said to be the head of the Khalistan Liberation Force, died mysteriously in the UK in June. A month before that, Paramjit Singh Panjwar, one of India's most wanted, was shot dead in Pakistan. It's worth pointing out the Nijjar murder in Canada is still unsolved.
And 2, that all steps be taken to hold perpetrators of this murder to account.
No arrests, no charges. So imagine being a Sikh in that community and learning now that not only was this a targeted hit, but that it may have been orchestrated by some member of a government who sees your people as a threat. How safe would you feel?
We need to be more specific on what's going on, because what he has caused here is chaos now, not only between Canada and India, but we have chaos with the communities that are settling in Canada and have settled for many, many years, and their homeland is India, where in fact they go back and visit India at this time of year and see their families.
Right now, the RCMP's homicide team is leading the murder investigation, but they're likely not alone.
At the same time, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, was likely also conducting a fact-finding investigation potentially into foreign interference, to basically figure out who might have ordered this targeted assassination.
Canada has declared its deep concerns to the top intelligence and security officials of the Indian government.
Now, this is fascinating. That, before getting to this step, the Prime Minister dropping this bombshell on the world, he took the matter privately to Indian officials. What might that tell us?
I think it's interesting that it was done quietly first. And perhaps that means that they don't suspect that it occurred at the highest levels of government. The allegation may not stem from there.
Because sure, if you confront the people you think are responsible before you've completed your investigation, you've tipped your hand. Might the killing have been ordered by someone lower down? Now, let's be clear. We don't know who exactly within the Indian government Canadian officials believe was involved, but we can make a guess at the strength of the evidence.
The intelligence has to be credible enough for the Prime Minister to stand up in the House of Commons and make such a statement against the world's largest democracy and one of the world's largest economies.
And speaking of trips and credible facts,
last week at the G20, I brought them personally and directly to Prime Minister Modi in no uncertain terms.
The G20 Leaders Summit in India that just wrapped up. That photo makes so much more sense now. A lot's been made about the cooling relationship between Canada and India. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, scolded Canada at the G20 for its lax handling of Sikh protests.
What do you want?
The Indian government sees these as extremist elements. They are promoting secessionism and inciting violence against Indian diplomats, damaging diplomatic premises, and threatening the Indian community in Canada and their places of worship. Modi also didn't meet Canada for bilateral talks during the G20, seen as something of a snub. Canada has since postponed a planned trade mission to India next month.
Things like technology transfers, sharing of information, certainly the intelligence sharing relationship will be curtailed further than it already had been.
So now, we can't say for sure, but the souring of relations does seem to have a pretty clear aggravating factor.
The level of frostiness in the relationship at the G20 took it to another level. Trudeau obviously missing one of the key dinners there, and you don't have to be an expert, but just looking at the video and photographs of the meetings that they had, it was clear that there was something additional, and I think now some of that context is being filled.
Any involvement of a foreign government in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is an unacceptable violation of our sovereignty. It is contrary to the fundamental rules by which free, open, and democratic societies conduct themselves.
There's the mention of Canadian sovereignty again, and this mention here of free, open, and democratic societies. That's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau drawing a line. You remember the story of Jamal Khashoggi?
After a fortnight of denials, Saudi Arabia has admitted that the missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi died during his visit to the country's consulate in Istanbul.
In 2018, the Saudi journalist and dissident was strangled and dismembered at a Saudi consulate in Turkey. Saudi agents were behind it. International sanctions followed. Earlier that same year, a former Russian military spy, Sergei Skripal, was poisoned while in the UK. The Prime Minister there at the time, Theresa May, accused Russia of being responsible. Skripal survived. But all to say that there is a history of this kind of thing happening, and that makes it a global issue.
As you would expect, we've been working closely and coordinating with our allies on this very serious matter.
According to a senior government source who spoke to CBC News, Canada has briefed leaders of its closest allies, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, French President Emmanuel Macron, and US President Joe Biden.
In the strongest possible terms, I continue to urge the government of India to cooperate with Canada to get to the bottom of this matter.
Now that's interesting, calling on India to cooperate with Canada. You know, for this crime to be resolved, it's possible India would have to play ball.
My hunch would be that the gunmen are long gone. We could potentially see charges brought against individuals. But if they're no longer in Canada, you need the cooperation of wherever they are, potentially in India, to bring those people back to Canada, extradite them for prosecution.
But would India cooperate? In the Khashoggi case, there was a loud international cry for Saudi Arabia to extradite the 18 suspects in his murder. In the end, Saudi Arabia put on trial and punished less than half that number. The trials were flawed. No transparency, and they didn't go after the highest-ranking officials. Here's how the PM's address ends.
I know many Canadians, particularly members of the Indo-Canadian community, are feeling angry or perhaps frightened right now. Let us not allow this to change us.
So here's the thing. This is as much about international peace and national security as it is about maintaining a domestic calm.
This is, again, speaking in many ways to the Indian Canadian community and the variety within that community, that we cannot let this example be a case where we spiral off into a tit for tat. Now is not the time for vigilantism, and now is time for the legal investigation and the law enforcement agencies to conduct their work.
It would be impossible for me to overstate how charged an issue this is. It's not just people's lives, it's their religion, their identity, their sense of what's right and wrong that is on the line here. What the Prime Minister likely doesn't want to see here is for tempers to flare, for Canadians to turn on Canadians. Because if that happens, the government will have one fight too many on its hands.